Hey folks, welcome back. So in the last video, we discussed about how we can make SQLAlchemy queries and use that with FastAPI. So in this video, we will mainly talk about how we can make async SQLAlchemy queries to the database and how we can use that with FastAPI. So these are the prerequisites for that. So we need async IO knowledge, and we need async PG package, and we need a green package. So let's talk about async IO a bit. So async IO is a library to write concurrent code. So we can make a concurrent executions of the code. And how we can implement that? We can implement that with async await syntax. So let's look at this statement. So it's a perfect fit for input output bound operations and high level structured network mode. This is a quick example. Quick introduction for that. So if you want more information, you can visit this Python official documentation and read more about it. So let's look at the existing APIs that we have implemented. So I'm running the development server by using this command unicon and the source of the app, and then we are reloading that. So let me go to Google Chrome and we can look at the existing APIs. So all these APIs are asynchronous APIs. So we haven't used any async await syntax in that. So let's install the required packages first. So let me go back to VS Code again. Okay, let's install these two. I think I have already installed it, but let's look at. So let's do this. Pip install async pg. So this required to connect. This is required to make async calls to the DB. So this is for concurrent executions. So we need this as well. So here we can see that we already installed async pg, and let me try to install greenlight as well. So it's saying greenlight also already installed. So if you didn't install it, let's install these two packages. So let's start with the development. So we need to create the database URL this way. So we will be using PostgreSQL, and we also need async pg to make the async database queries. Let's start developing that. So we need async database connection. So let's go to DB and create the database file. So let's call it as async base.py. So now we need to create async engine. So let's import the statement from SQLAlchemy.extension.asyncio. So import create async engine. So we need this. So in order to create the async engine, we need a database URL. Let's create engine, async engine, and we need DB URL. So let's construct the DB URL first. So DB URL equals to let's copy this. We need that in this format. So we need to format this, and we need DB user, DB password, DB host, and all this. So we need to export all these environment variables. Here in .env, I have all these environment variables. So let me set that. I can do that using source command .env. So when I get the echo $db user, so I'll get that. So all the environment variables were set. So now I need to get all this. For that I need to import OS model, and then DB user equals to OS dot get DNV, and then get DB user. So we need to do the same thing for DB password, host, port, and name. Let's do that quick. And let me do the same thing for host, and same thing for port, and same thing for DB name. Okay, so now we have the DB URL, and we need to print the SQL statements onto the console, so we can pass the echo equals to true. So now we have the async engine. So now we need to have the async session. So we can create the session using session maker. So we need to import that statement from SQLAlchemy.orm import session maker. So let's create the local session. Yeah, let's call it as async local session. async local session equals to session maker. We need to pass the async engine for this, and expire on commit equals to false. So we need all attributes after the execution of um, query as well. So that's why we need to have the expire on commit equals to false. So otherwise the attributes will be expired. Now we need to pass the class. So when we hover it, we can see the all required things here, or we can just go to the actual Python file and check what exactly we need to pass there. So here we can see the class. So let's close that and come back here. So we need to pass the async class. By default, it will use a session as a default class, but we need async session for this. So we can import that from SQLAlchemy async IO. Let's async session. Let's copy that, paste here. Now we have the async local session. So now we will be creating generator for generating the async session, and a decorator which will take the function and pass the first parameter as a session. So let's do that. Let's define async def. So this is async await syntax. So in order to use the generator, it's better to use the context async context manager. Let's import from context lib import async context manager. So let's use this decorator. So let's call it as get async session. Let's create the session equals to async local session, and let's yield it, right? Yield session, and let's say if we have any exceptions, except exception, try except, yeah, sorry, except exception, see, and then print the exception. Now once we print the exception, we need to roll back the any transaction that we are executing to the database. So let's do await session dot rollback. Yeah, so once we done that, finally we need to close the session. Session dot close. So now we have the generator to get the session. We need to implement the decorator for this. Let's write the decorator async session, which takes the function as argument parameter, and define the wrapper which takes the arguments and keyword arguments and returns the function by passing the session as a first argument. But we didn't have session, so we will be using the generator for that. Okay, let's do async with session as session. So for that we need to define this to async, otherwise we won't be able to use async with. Okay, so now we have this. We just need to pass this statement inside that keyword arguments. Okay, let's return wrapper. As it's a async function, we need to await it. Okay, so we have the decorator now and generator both are ready. Let's go to queries and implement the query to fetch the categories. So if we look at the existing code, so this is already this is for insert. Let's look at the fetch all categories. So this is the code for all categories. So here what we are doing, we are just fetching the all categories and returning that. But here we are using the synchronized session. So we will be using the same thing, but we will be using the async session for that. Let's create the queries and call it as async category dot view. So let's paste that. So here we will be using async session. So from dot db dot async base import async session. So that is this decorator. So which takes the first parameter as session, and it should be async function. So async, and this is the query. So we need to import the required things from from SQLAlchemy import select, and we also need to import the SQLAlchemy table, which is category. So we can find that in models. Let's look at that. So this is the model, that ID, name, description, and timestamp. So let's go back again to this file and import that from models category, import category. So now we have category, and we don't need this print statement because in here we are using echo equals to true, so it will automatically prints the query in the console. That's fine. Now we need to await the session. Result equals to await session, because it's a async session, so we need to await it. Execute the statement and then do the same thing. Result.scalars.all. This will return all the records in the in this category table. So what we did, we use the async session decorator, which will give the async session here. Let's call it as async session for better readability. Async session await async session dot execute this statement. So now we have the query ready. So what we need to do, we need to add async endpoint to the FastAPI. Let's go to routers and category. So these are the existing synchronous APIs. So let's add async endpoint to it. In order to do that, let's do router dot get, which is a get endpoint. Let's look at the existing endpoint, which is this categories. And status code equals to 200, and list async categories. Initially just return empty list and test it out. So now let's restart the application. You go on reload, and then let's go to the Google Chrome, and let's refresh that. So here we can we didn't have that. It seems we didn't say that. Let me go back to VS Code again. Yeah, so this should be async categories. Let's come back and refresh it. So here we can see that one more endpoint is added. When we try it out, so we can see the empty response, which is good. So let's go back to VS Code again. So now we need to use the async database query here. Let's import that from queries async category import async, no, not async session, which categories. Okay, we already have the fetch categories. Here we need to change the name. So let's go there and change it to async fetch categories. Let's come back to routers and change the input to async fetch categories. Let's use that here. So as it's async, we need to use async syntax for this, and this is a async function, so we need to use await for this. Await async function, and it's not expecting any arguments. So let's save this, and now go back to the browser and again test it. Okay, so let's refresh it and test it. So now we can see the two records here. Let's go back to the console and check, the terminal. Let's go back to VS Code, and here we can see the actual query. So here we can see that select category ID, category name, and description. This is the actual query that is being executed. Let me go back to pg admin, and let's try the same query here, and we can able to see the same number of records that we received in the API. So let's check that out. So let me execute it. So here we can able to see the two records, apms and arts, scraps, and saving. So let's come back to Google Chrome, where we have the docs to make the API calls. So here we can see the same names, apps and names, and art, scraps, and saving. So that's how we can able to implement the async await database queries with the FastAPI. So let's look at the performance. Let's say we have a blocking mechanism. Let's say we are doing sleep for 0.5 seconds, and how it affects the both APIs. Like, so here we can see async categories API and categories APIs, which is a synchronous thing. So both do the same operation, but we have the more number of requests, how it performs. Let's look at that. Let me go back to VS Code again. So here I have written a simple script which will make the parallel request to the endpoint, and logs the response, how much time it took to serve the given number of requests. So let's look at that code. So this is the simple code for that. Here I have the pool, and which is a multiprocessing pool, so which makes the requests. And here I'm sending the 150 requests to this endpoint, and I'm logging the time difference. So this is the start time and end time. I'm just doing end minus start, which will give the total time taken. Okay, so let's do the let's test the load on these categories for 150 requests in the other endpoint async categories. Let's do that. Let's come here and let's do clear and run the load test. So currently we are doing it for categories, which is synchronous. So it took 5.06 seconds. Let's do the same thing for async request. It took 5.01, 5.06 and 5.01. It seems synchronous thing is faster, but when we have blocking mechanism, let's see how it performs. Let me change code a bit. Let's go back to routers category and import sleep statements, which is synchronous and asynchronous. Import time, import async IO. So let's modify this a bit. Let's sleep time dot sleep for 0.2 seconds, or let's say 0.5 seconds, and do the same thing for async as well. Async IO, wait async IO dot sleep 0.2 seconds. Let's do the same thing here as well. 5 seconds is more, 0.5 seconds is more. Let's do 0.2 seconds. So here we are just waiting for 0.2 seconds and then making the query and fetching the data back. So here also we are doing the same thing, waiting for the 0.2 seconds and then fetching the data. So the only thing is here we are doing it in asynchronous manner, but there we are doing it synchronous. That's the only difference. So let's test that. So currently we are making calls to synchronous API. Let's test that. So we can see that like it took 0.5.25 seconds. Let's do the same for it took 5 seconds, 5.25 seconds. Let's do the same for async categories. So it took 5.22 seconds. Let's say we have 200 requests. Let's make it to 200 requests, and let's test the synchronous API first. So 5.31. Let's do the same thing for async. So 5.22. So here it's 5.31, and here it took 5.22. So the async endpoint is performing better than this. Let's say if we send 500 requests for this, now we can see the actual difference for that. Let's test the synchronous first. So it took 7 seconds. Let's test the async. So it just took 6.5 seconds. So here we can see the difference. So it's better to use the async IO when we have the IO bound operations. If you find this video useful, then please do like and share and subscribe. Thank you.